Part 2. Night with No Escape. The Devil's Curse in the Haunted Tape. After dinner, Nick wandered around the house. On an old wooden table, he discovered a dusty old cassette player that ran on batteries. The player, with its yellowed plastic casing and numerous scratches, evoked a sense of a bygone era. Beside the cassette player lay an old cassette tape, with a bit of tape exposed. Its label faded as if someone had used it long ago and then forgotten about it. "Look at this. An old cassette player," he said, picking it up and blowing off the dust, feeling the cold plastic in his hands. As he looked around, he saw nothing unusual, but felt as though someone was watching him. He carefully inserted the tape into the cassette player, a mix of curiosity and unease in his mind. Ash, Jesse, and Anne gathered around, their eyes filled with both curiosity and a touch of fear. "Should we listen to it?" Anne asked, her voice trembling. "It should be fine. It's just an old tape," Nick replied, though he too felt a sense of unease. Driven by curiosity and a slight urge for adventure, the group decided to listen to the tape. Nick carefully pressed the play button on the old cassette player, and the tape began to play with a crackling sound. The dim light of the oil lamp cast an eerie glow on the cassette player, making it look almost sinister. In the tense silence, the only sounds were the creaking of the old house and the steady breathing of the group. The space around them seemed to freeze, as everyone focused on the sounds coming from the old cassette player. The raspy, trembling voice of a man began to speak, each word drawn out and filled with dread. "If you're listening to this tape, it means I'm no longer in this world," the voice echoed ominously, sending chills down their spines. "If you're listening to this tape, I must warn you, never release the demon. That day I made a terrible mistake. An irreparable mistake," the man continued, his voice mingling with labored breathing as if he were terrified of something unseen. "I accidentally unleashed an ancient demon while performing a dark ritual from an old book. A ritual whose consequences I didn't fully understand." The voice abruptly stopped, leaving only the crackling sound and a terrifying silence. The group exchanged gamandaces, their eyes filled with fear and confusion. Amanda clutched Ash's hand tightly, a cold and uneasy feeling spreading through her body. The dim light from the oil lamp began to fade, and darkness started to envelop them, carrying with it the terrifying warnings from the old tape. They didn't know that what they had just heard was not only a warning, but also the beginning of an inescapable nightmare. Amanda felt a chill run down her spine, as each word seemed to seep into her bones. The group remained silent, listening to the man's words as if they were slowly being drawn into the gloomy atmosphere of the house. The oil lamp flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls, making it seem as though the house itself was coming to life and listening along with them. That demon, it cannot be contained. It brings with it hatred and horror from ancient times. Ever since it was released, I and everyone who has set foot in this house have been cursed with a terrible fate." The man's voice became choked with despair and regret. Nick and Amanda's eyes met, and they both saw the fear in each other's eyes. Jesse held tightly to Nick's hand, the feeling of safety slipping away in an instant. Anne, huddled in a corner, felt the fear envelop her entire body, shivers running down her spine. That curse, it doesn't end with death. It lasts forever, in pain and fear. There's no way to escape, no way to atone. The man's voice grew weaker, as though he were speaking from some distant place where darkness reigned eternally. Suddenly, the cassette player stopped, leaving behind a deathly silence. The group seemed frozen in place, no one daring to breathe deeply. The last words of the tape still echoed in their minds, leaving behind an unshakable dread. The air in the house grew stifling. The chirping of insects outside sounded like the whispers of demons. The weak light from the oil lamp flickered, threatening to go out, making the darkness around them even thicker and more terrifying. Amanda whispered, her voice trembling, We need to leave here immediately." But Nick shook his head, his eyes filled with concern. "It's already dark, and we don't know the way out of the forest. We have to stay here until morning." They huddled together, trying to find comfort and protection in the darkness. But deep down, each of them knew that tonight would not be peaceful. The man's words on the tape felt like a curse, a warning that had been cast, and now they could only wait for the horror that was slowly approaching. Suddenly, the oil lamp flickered out, plunging the room into thick darkness. The house seemed to be swallowed by an endless night, leaving only the sound of rapid breathing and the pounding of hearts echoing in each chest. The air grew suffocating and cold, as though cursed spirits were now present, watching and waiting. Jessie felt an invisible hand, cold and stiff, touch her shoulder. The sensation was like 1,000 sharp needles pricking her skin, overwhelming her with fear. She screamed in terror, her cry echoing in the dark, startling the others, their hearts pounding in their chests. "Jessie, what's wrong?" Nick asked in panic, though his voice trembled. Someone touched me," Jessie stammered, her body shaking uncontrollably, her eyes wide with fear. Ash turned on his flashlight, scanning the surroundings, but there was nothing but darkness and an eerie silence. Amanda clung tightly to Ash, feeling the cold and unease surrounding them. Anne, huddled in a corner, looked around frantically, as if she could see the invisible entities drawing near. The group decided to try to rest, hoping to regain their strength and leave the house at dawn. They spread out their sleeping bags on the decaying wooden floor, but no one could close their eyes. Every little sound, whether it was the chirping of insects or the wind howling through the cracks, made them jump in fear. Lying next to Ash, Amanda whispered, "I don't feel right. This place is so scary." Ash tried to reassure her. "We're just tired and stressed. We'll leave here first thing in the morning."